This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about the redo versus second act vision of remarriage, and we will talk about this as soon as I tell you to subscribe. I have around 200 subscriber episodes for $8.99 a month. You'll get access to all of them, and new ones come out all the time. They're 25% of my episodes. My most recent one was De-Romanticize Your Life, which is in opposition to the whole romanticize your life idea that is all over social media. And I talk about who should de-romanticize their life and who should actually romanticize their life at the end. So please do listen to that and all of the other ones. The random couple reframe was the one right before that. I have the one about oral sex on women from years ago that everybody likes. Okay, and lots more. All right, so I work with a lot of people who are in their second marriage because I'm in my second marriage, and people like to go to therapists who understand them. And of course, I have my book, How to Talk to Your Kids About Your Divorce. I've been divorced, whatever. People like to go to a therapist similar to them because they think that you'll understand them, and you do understand them. So because you've been through the same stuff. So what I see often is that particularly in age gap relationships, which is more often the man is older than the woman, I see that the couple has a different perspective on remarriage. And this has been useful for many of my clients to think about. And the woman wants the redo. So she was probably married before, and if not, she had a boyfriend or long-term relationships or whatever. And this is her real marriage. This second marriage is the marriage. This is the love story. This is the one that is what she hopes she will think back on her in her old age. This is the prime marriage. This is the prime relationship. This is the one with children, or the one where she could, or if she had children when she remarried, if she was divorced and she had children, this is going to be the one where the guy and she stay in love and provide this stable relationship that the children, whether or not there's new children also, but at least the children from the prior marriage, see as a template for a loving marriage and a role model. And the other marriage didn't work out, but it was basically never going to, and there was all this bad stuff related to it. And now she's in the marriage that makes sense to her and that goes along with her self-concept of being in a loving, healthy relationship with children. And then, on the other hand, we got the people who, and this could be either gender, but I often see it more in men and especially more in older men, where the marriage was good. The first marriage was fine, and then they got divorced, or possibly the woman died. And now they are back on the market and they met this lovely woman and now they're going to get married again. And that's cool, and they love her, but it's not the first marriage, it's not their first rodeo. And when they're in old age, they're going to look back at both of these marriages with, fondness. And even if the first marriage eventually went to shit, they thought it was pretty good. It raised some good kids, and, it's kind of like they don't have anything against the first wife necessarily. And it didn't work out, often due to them. Could be due to substance issues, could be due to infidelity. But either way, they take at least some of the responsibility of, the marriage not working out. It's usually not a situation where she was they felt the problem, like she's an alcoholic or she's abusive or she cheated or whatever. Instead, they think either they grew apart or that they themselves were the problem. And so that overall the woman was a good mother to the children that they had. And now they have met this other wonderful person, and they're gonna maybe have kids with this person, maybe not. But either way, this is going to be a good second marriage. They've learned a lot. And obviously the people I've seen have been in therapy, learned more about themselves. They're hoping to make this even less conflictual and more healthy maybe than the first. But also can't beat being young. So in the first one, they were younger. That was fun, and there were a lot of things. Everything happened for the first time. And so they liked the first marriage. That first marriage was good for them. It's like a second career. So like if you are, let's say, you're a lawyer, and then 20 years after you become a professor. So nobody tells you when you go to show up at your job as a professor, they're not like, promise me that this is better than when you were a lawyer. You really hated being a lawyer, right? Like deeply, you really didn't like being a lawyer, but you're going to love being a professor. This is your real career. That one was just a starter career, right? Nobody does that. But if you are remarrying, your second wife, whether or not she says it explicitly, may say that, like she may think that. She may be hoping that her vision of this as a redo, the marriage that makes her life all good and makes sense, then that's how you really view it too. And you may not, you may say that was then, this is now. I like being a lawyer now. I like being a professor. Times change. I'm glad I'm a professor now and not still a lawyer, but I like being a lawyer. Being a lawyer is actually pretty fun. Right? So what you don't want to do in that situation as the man is say, well, actually, I can't really picture being with you when I was 25. I think she was a better fit for me then. Of course, now that I'm 45, it's totally different and you're great. And, I'm really glad. But, back then, I think she was great. Don't say that, don't set yourself up for problems and don't hurt the feelings of the person who wants to have their full life with you. Now, this, of course, doesn't mean you got to talk shit about your ex, and healthy women will actually find that to be quite a red flag. But, there is a way that maybe you can get to more of a communal vision. So in couples counseling, if the couple was struggling, in the aftermath, the honeymoon stage wears off, you're in your second marriage, there's a lot of, stress, blended family can certainly be very stressful in and of itself, then it can behoove the couple to try to think about it from each other's perspective. So, for example, if the second wife has to deal a lot with the first wife because the guy's co-parenting with her, then it's great and all. It would be great for the guy to say, oh, this is so great, co-parenting with you, we have much more of the same values, et cetera, if that was true, but sometimes it's not true. Sometimes he had like all the same values as the first wife. And with the second wife, she's a next generation and the parenting is actually quite different, and she thinks different things and she's always, talking about setting boundaries and, psychological jargon. And the first wife was just hosting his mom for Christmas. And, they were much more simpatico, even though, of course, by the end, there was no spark, no whatever, and whatever sort of conflict there was, maybe there was still a spark, but, they just fought too much or who knows, But the point is that if he understands her vision of this as a redo, he could say more things about the firsts that he's doing with her without throwing the ex under the bus. And if she understands in a more objective way, possibly with the help of her own therapy, that he had a long marriage and most of it probably wasn't terrible, and wanting it to be terrible would actually be bad because he would be a less healthy guy if he stayed in just a complete clusterfuck for like however long he was married the first time. And she could get to a place where she celebrates kind of the newness and the firsts that they have together without having to be jealous of and revile the things that he did with the ex, which happened when he was a totally different person. When he was just a completely different man, a younger guy that she might not have liked, honestly, at that time. So there's some funny stuff on social media where people say, oh, my boyfriend wished or my girlfriend wished they met me younger, but here's what they look like younger and here's what I look like younger. And it's like, the guy's like the captain of the football team and she's like, theater person, a super emo goth girl, and he's this all-American guy. And so then it's funny because they were so different in high school, and the guy's saying, oh, I wish I met you in high school, but she's saying with humor, oh, it wouldn't have worked out then. That's kind of the best case, most objective scenario, is for both people to be like, you know what? We didn't meet when we were younger. And if we had, we may not have gotten along, especially if there's an age gap. It literally isn't possible without sci-fi, like for like a guy who was 25 to start dating a girl who's like, 16 years old or something, if there's like some huge age gap. But either way, point being that both people, as always, need to operate from a place of empathy, understanding, and objectivity, trying to get to a place where they could see, okay, what are the firsts of this? And this is supposed to be the last love story we ever had. Kind of doesn't even matter about the first. Let's look at this relationship now and make it the best that it could be without having to repudiate the other one. But also, there are people who do keep comparing the second marriage to the first unfavorably, and sometimes unintentionally saying things like, oh, well, it used to be easier to, go to the zoo. I remember when we took the kids to the zoo back in the day, it didn't seem like we needed to pack all these snacks. Right. And so then that's going to be taken by the second wife who's anxious and packing all the snacks as like some sort of gauntlet thrown down, where there is some sort of downward comparison where she is being compared unfavorably to the supposedly laid back ex-wife who, quite honestly, he doesn't remember everything that happened. She probably packed snacks too, But point being, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be comparing. I mean, this sounds commonsensical, but then again, you may not even have thought about it as a downward comparison. You may think, but I'm just sharing stuff from my life. Kind of that's my experience as a parent, and couldn't we benefit from my wider perspective, having already raised kids or like whatever, yeah, but no, like remember, especially if your wife is having her first child with you after you've had other children, you don't want to come off as like everything. And sure, that letting the baby cry for 2 minutes isn't going to do anything. That children fall and that head wounds bleed a lot and like all of these things. But she wants to experience everything for the first time with all of the feelings that go along with that. And quite honestly, younger people just have more feelings, I mean, that's like, I talk about this all the time, like a younger, playful, emotional mammal, is like, if a puppy isn't the same as an older dog. So if your second wife is a puppy and you're an older dog, you got to kind of get in the headspace of remembering what it was to be a puppy and remembering the anxiety that you may have felt as, for example, a new father at age 30, and now she's a new mother at age 30. Well, you may be now not a new father anymore at age 40, but guess what? She's still a young mother at age 30. And it doesn't really help you to come in and be like, actually, none of this shit matters because the kids don't remember anything that happens for the first 4 years. Like, that doesn't really help, let her figure that out in therapy, because she doesn't want you to rain on her parade. So a lot of the redo vision comes along with all of this emotion and positive drama, because what is love if not dramatic? You can't even be in love without having emotions and drama, because otherwise, why in the world would people get married? Why would they link their life to somebody if they felt no dramatic emotional love feelings at all? There would be no reason. So point is that a lot of times people forget how emotional and dramatic they were at a younger age when they are with their second relationship. And then they're like, oh, yes, it was fine. I've lived a long and colorful life. I've had many relationships and they've all been fine. Well, that's not how your current spouse is going to feel if she has more of a redo vision. Now, does this ever happen in the gender inverse? I mean, it's got to statistically, but I've not seen it. I've mostly seen it in this kind of situation where it's a younger woman, older man, and he's, thinking, yeah, this is great to get remarried. Also, first marriage was fine. And she wants this to be the massive love story of both of their lives. And they kind of both have to get to the middle where they can understand the other person's perspective. And this is really, what I'm trying to do here is to cultivate your awareness of the other person's perspective. And then on the side of the guy, he's not supposed to be like, actually, none of this shit matters. Why don't you be less emotional? And she's not supposed to be like, why aren't you, staying up all night by the bedside of the baby whose fever is 99? Because he knows the baby's not going to die, because he's had babies before. That's why. And so it can be very good for each partner in the couple to say that the other one's behavior is helpful and positive. Like, oh, he's really a calm presence and he kind of knows what's going on and that's great. And, oh, it's wonderful to see her enthusiasm and love and devotion to the baby, that's ideal. And couples can get there with introspection, empathy, and often therapy, And so both of them are not repudiating and minimizing the other's experience, but kind of celebrating it and looking for the positives in it. All right, I hope you guys found this interesting, even if it's not applicable to your situation directly. Hopefully the ongoing and underlying themes of empathy and perspective taking within a couple were beneficial, made you think about something or other. That was good. And thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.